All right. And give everyone a chance to get to know us and what we do, and maybe get to know a little bit about you. And feel free to ask questions. Um, we have a few questions that we have planned that we're going to discuss, but at any time, if y'all want to say something or ask, you can jump in there and do that. But welcome. This is a open conversation with the Mystica Americana.
It's really interesting because during the winter time, people are telling stories. And so it's a lot of listening in the silence, right? But this time of year, now we're at this cross quarter point, and now it's like the questions are starting to come. Do you feel that?
Yeah.
It's like, you know, so I really love this quote from Goethe's Green Snake and the Beautiful Lily, where it says, "What is more precious than gold? Conversation."
Conversation.
Yeah,
Sure.
Absolutely.
great that we can ask each other questions and have a conversation. So, yeah, welcome everybody. And, I just wanted to start out. I don't know if folks have been over to the MA website, but on there, it's very succinct. Richard put this beautiful statement out there, and I'm going to read the statement. And so then I'm going to ask Richard to really kind of just go through it step by step to really try to unpack it and see what it really means. So, Mystica Americana is a ritual order transmitting the Rosicrucian initiatic system of Rudolf Steiner based upon the original rites of Mystica Eterna. That's a small sentence, but there's a lot there. So, Richard, can you go through it with us, and maybe step by step we can have a
Yeah.
little conversation.
Yeah.
Just
Sure.
start out like, what is a ritual order?
Well, first, I would like to mention the name Mystica Americana. It was a Latinized version that I chose to represent the mysteries coming to America, the mysteries of anthroposophy and spiritual science and Rudolf Steiner, specifically the rituals, which leads to the ritual order question. We're not a secret order. We're not Freemasons. Everything that we do in one way or another is public, online, in archives, part of the first class, different things like that. It's not something that we have in secret that no one else has. What we do is apply rituals to spiritual science and anthroposophy, the rituals that Steiner created himself before founding anthroposophy. The content in the rituals is all spiritual science, it's all anthroposophy. But what it does, it provides a structure rather than abstract knowledge, rather than just having a bunch of knowledge from lectures or reading. It gives you a way to enact that knowledge, and it's almost hard to explain if you haven't done it. But there are times in the ritual where I've had eureka moments, where once I see it enacted and I see the dialogue take place between different officers in a lodge who are speaking anthroposophy, who are speaking spiritual science in this fashion, I realized, holy smokes, this, I was missing something. And it allows me to be active with the knowledge I have. So a ritual order is just an order that uses ceremonies like a play to enact the wisdom that they have. The wisdom that we use comes from Rudolf Steiner and anthroposophy. The rituals that we use to enact that also come from Rudolf Steiner. So it's just a way to, in my opinion, the ritual work is anthroposophy applied, not just in life, which we always live, but in a rhythmic and meaningful way that allows the knowledge that Steiner gave through all the lectures, that gave through all the books, to be put in motion. And for me, it's a lot more meaningful to have a dialogue, let's say, with a character that may represent Orion, or that may represent Lucifer, or that may represent a different character that Steiner has talked about. But when that character is before you speaking and you are speaking back, that to me gives a lot more depth than really just sitting and reading it and having it in an abstract way. So that's how I apply a ritual order in what we're doing. Um, Mizraim is the Hebrew word for Egypt. The Mizraim Dienst or Mizraim service applies a lot of Egyptian archetypes. And that's not unique to Steiner and the Mystica Aeterna. It's not unique to a lot of the ritual orders. But Steiner took the old archetypes and, I would say, Christianized them. He brought Christ into them. So when we speak the ritual words and when we do the acts within a lodge, they are Christ filled. A lot of it old Egyptian archetypes. So, for example, we would have Isis involved in some of the work that we do, and different Egyptian characters that Steiner has spoken quite a bit about. And each of those characters within the ritual will have a dialogue that they speak and things that they would do in the lodge. So that's where Mizraim, and why it's called Mizraim Dienst, also because Steiner's charter had came from a group that had the name Mizraim as well.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to just really look at what is ritual, right? And you really brought this beautiful picture of how Steiner has taken these ancient things and brought it into this Christic way of working, and I always think of ritual as being sort of yeah, having this symbolic gesture, using certain signs or images or mantric words, right? That we work with in this sacred temple setting,
Mm-hmm.
right? And to me, it's really like this, like a physical reflection of what is taking place in the spiritual world. So ritual really kind of gives us access to this world,
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah,
and
it's like a mirror. So the ritual, it's a play that we do in the lodge. Each of us have roles in that play, and it's intended to be a mirror of spiritual realities. And to me, that holds so much value because it becomes, obviously, anthroposophy and spiritual science is real to all of us. We live it the best that we can, but it becomes so much more concrete as you're moving through these symbolic acts. So it's really opened up my understanding of Steiner to a much more profound level.
and
I'd like to share, if I may. For me, there's the experience of bringing it to life makes it so much more vivid and visceral in my being. When I just study the texts, even in a study group where I converse about it, I find a disconnect between my intellectual processes and my actual physical body. And certainly through eurythmy and through speech gestures and things like that, I can gain access to that. But the vividness and visceral experience of playing out the roles and really making eye contact of someone in this imaginative space of these different characters that we experience multidimensionalizes the wisdom and has, because it's a ritual order process, there is an order, there's a series of rituals that we do as a group, and then we also have with each step, and this goes to another question, which is what is an initiatic system, and this question of initiation. each step that we go through brings a new set of rituals with it, which for me have given me a depth of experiential. I could say I feel like I experience the Christ and the community in a more multidimensional way, which I think carries and stays with me in a moment to moment daily living process.
Right, and this idea of a ritual order to me also is it's a free association of striving human beings. Right, we are a community. You know, we are an order. Our ritual order really, convenes to, as Richard was saying, perform these ritual ceremonies. We have these rites of initiation, but we also get together for festivals. We have seminars, and we go on social excursions to sacred places, right? So I really feel like this is where we get the name fellowship or fraternity. This is where this comes in, this fraternity or this fellowship, this community part of the ritual order.
Yeah, absolutely. Very
And
well
then
put, brother.
that leads us to, maybe not everybody is so familiar with Rudolf Steiner, and in a sense we sense his work as a modern Rosicrucian process. And so maybe we could talk about what is Rosicrucianism and what is it in a modern sense. Richard, maybe you'd like to start that conversation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, sure, I'd love to. And that's really a can of worms there because we have our understanding, and then, there are a lot of multi different understandings that people have. I personally think that a Rosicrucian is different from a student of Rosicrucianism. Um, I don't believe that following this path automatically qualifies you for the title. Now, some do. Um, I believe that would kind of be dragging it through the mud because I reserve that term, and this is just me personally, for the ones that Steiner called the elders or the masters. There were 12 of them plus Christian Rosenkreuz. They are the top of the line as far as who the Rosicrucians are. Below them are their students, are the initiates in their order. But Rosicrucian is a modern form of initiation that brought the old wisdom, the ancient wisdom, up through the various ancient cultures into modern times by updating it for the modern psyche for people. Steiner was, in my opinion, foremost among those who did that by adapting the teachings and infusing them with Christ and bringing them to the modern world and giving them to people. So we are followers of the Rosy Cross philosophy, hence the name Rosicrucian. Um, I believe spiritual science and anthroposophy are the modern version of Rosicrucianism for our times. And what that means is we try to apply a scientific advancement to what religion attempts to do basically emotionally. Hence, we call it spiritual science, meaning that there is a system behind what we do. There is a first step, there is a second step, there is a third step, there is an application, a way to and to not do things. And to me, that really defines Rosicrucianism because it gives structure to what is abstract and it updates old forms to be appropriate for the modern age.
Really, when you think about from its beginnings, Rosicrucianism has stood behind world events, acting as a quiet counterforce to the materialistic view of nature and the adversarial impulses that work to mislead humanity from our noble destiny, which has come into society more and more.
Yes.
So, instead, Rosicrucianism places the wisdom of the human being as you said, this is anthroposophy at the center of evolution, instead of this, simply being part of an abstract calculation. So,
Right.
yeah, we take up the study, the training, the practice of occult esotericism, which is a philosophy or a science of the hidden spiritual forces,
Right.
right?
Christian
That's
esotericism.
exactly right. So this is the what's the essence behind nature, and shaped by this potent, holistic, human-centered worldview. There are these enduring goals and impulses of this Rosicrucian stream, which continues,
Yes.
right? And we're taking it up as individuals to work with these new mysteries, which engage the heart with the intellect, while,
Right.
as we continue to say, it's deeply practical.
Indeed. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, our research is really about asking, like how our quest for truth speaks to this present age. And Steiner was really good about that and really shows us that way. Esoteric principles are meant to be lived in everyday life, transforming our thoughts, our emotions, our actions. And I guess for me, primarily the Rosicrucian, if we're striving on this path, it's about taking up a practice of inner development. I see it as an alchemy of the soul, process of spiritual advancement through the grades, as Lisa was mentioning, which are rooted, as Richard said, in this cosmic esoteric Christianity, the Rose
Yeah.
Cross.
Yeah.
So with
Yeah.
that perspective on Rosicrucianism, can we talk in context to that and to this path a little bit more about what initiation is and what initiation is not, and how that relates to the processes that we uptake with Mystica Americana?
Yeah, sure. Many people would view initiation as membership in a group. You have been initiated. In one sense, that's true. It's not incorrect to say that you have been initiated into the Mystica Americana or you have been initiated into any other group. But in the spiritual sense, initiation is something completely different from membership. Initiation is an internal process. It may or may not be accompanied by a ceremony or a ritual, because initiation can happen alone to a person who is prepared to do it. And I like to think of it as when you're living the life that leads to initiation, it's almost like charging a battery or building energy into yourself and in yourself. And initiation is the change from static energy into dynamic energy. It is the awakening of spiritual reality consciously to you. So that may or may not involve being able to, for example, use the astral body as a vehicle of consciousness, or even the etheric body as a vehicle of consciousness. But to do so would definitely be initiation if you're able to do that, because it is initiation into the spiritual worlds. It is initiation into spiritual reality. It's not membership in a group. So being an initiate of the MA means that we are students of Steiner and that we are students of his Rosicrucian and spiritual scientific teachings. But in the spiritual sense that Steiner teaches it and that many Rosicrucians believe, that does not equate identically with what spiritual initiation is, because you have a little initiation and you have a big initiation. The little initiation is the membership. Big initiation has nothing to do with the order or the group that you are part of. What we try to do is facilitate that big initiation by giving the steps and the rituals and, of course, the spiritual science that Steiner gave us. We try to have all the tools that we can possibly have in order to work towards that big initiation into spiritual reality.
and every human being, well, maybe not every human being, but most people have latent spiritual capacities,
Yeah.
possibly acquired from previous lives that lay slumbering.
Right. Yeah. A lot of people can see things etherically and not realize that that's what they're seeing because they've either always done it so it doesn't stand out to them, or they just assume that everybody can see these things. Certain,
Or a lot of times we feel it as this yearning too. It's like,
yeah,
it's a yearning. It's like a something that can be awakened through initiation.
yes,
So,
absolutely.
a candidate for this kind of Rosicrucian initiation really does have to develop these faculties within themselves for this achievement of knowledge of the higher worlds, which of course
Right.
was one of Steiner's basic books, right?
Yeah. And
And then
that's a key point too, because initiation cannot be given to you by someone. You can't join a group and they give you an initiation. Now you can go through a ceremony, you can go through a ritual, you can join a lot of groups and you can be an initiate in 10 different things. But true spiritual initiation cannot be bought, it cannot be given. It has to be earned through the individual's own efforts and achieved by that individual.
and the way we work too is that there's a first step. I think of it as a sort of a preparation. And in MA, we introduce what we call the prospectus, right? Which I experienced as a kind of purification process. It really starts by stripping away our egotism so that we can know thyself.
Right.
It's about building a moral
Yeah.
foundation through study and journaling, dedicated meditations, and
Mhm.
consistent practice. I mean, that's what it takes.
Yeah. And for those who are listening who don't know what the prospectus is a 9-month period that prospective members of the MA have to go through before they can be initiated into the first degree. So it's a period of journaling and reflection and also reading the basic books of Steiner so that you come to, and it also helps weed out those who perhaps find that this path isn't for them, and that's fine as well. We don't ever say that this is for everyone. Some people find it beneficial, and to those who do, we welcome you. Others say, no, this is not for me, and that's equally fine. But what the prospectus does also, along with what you were saying there, Sister Hazel, is that it gives the person time to reflect on what they're doing as far as joining a group. It also makes sure that they are familiar with Steiner and serious about it, and also gives them the opportunity rather than just saying, yes, you can be initiated or no, you can't. It gives you a 9-month period similar to just gestation, whereby the individual themselves can grow in the work that we do through the documents that they will be given and the books that they have to read and the exercises that they have to do. And then when they finish that, if they finish it, then they are welcome to proceed into the first degree, what we call the apprentice.
Yeah, I mean, we really have to be willing to carry out what may at first seem very simple, yet, just like the six basic or the eightfold path, it's stuff that you have to do with patience and steadfastness. And that's a really great way to build a foundation.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. The prospectus is more for the individual than it is for us.
My experience is that if one uptakes the prospectus, one is presented with needing to develop the self-discipline to be truly committed to yourself. I mean that's redundant, self-discipline to yourself, but it really is. If I did not have the self-discipline developed by doing the six basic exercises and studying the materials, I don't feel that I would have had the will, a strong enough will to inspire me to then do what the first level of initiation, what I was called upon to do as an apprentice. And as I go through these steps deeper and deeper, I experience the need for the skills that were developed during the prospectus to be absolutely solid. I just always sort of keep dancing back to, I got to go back to the things I was doing in the prospectus to make sure I have the strength and the ability to stay with the activities that I'm invited to do as I continue on my progress.
Yes.
I couldn't be doing it without having done the work in the prospectus.
Right. The prospectus in some ways is similar to what other groups would call the neophyte. The initial stage of entry into this process, it's almost like a pre-degree. Yeah, and it kind of sets the foundation. You have to revisit the 6 basic exercises. You have to revisit, how to know higher worlds and outline of occult science. You have to journal and keep track of how this is working in your life. Are you doing the 6 basic exercises? What have you experienced? And that also allows you to have questions in the prospectus period. If you have questions about things, you can reach out to one of us or anyone, but most of the time it would be one of us since you're involved in that type of process. And a lot of things, will get unburied. When you're doing that type of work consistently, when you're doing it rhythmically as you should, and when you're engaging with it as you should during the prospectus period, it uncovers a lot of things, So it's really a foundational work for the beginning of what we do.
Do you think we need to talk a little more about who Rudolf Steiner is? I mean, is there anyone out there who would like, you can wave a hand or unmute and let us know, or does everyone here kind of have a handle on who Steiner is?
Are we preaching to the choir here?
Yeah.
They're pretty familiar with Steiner.
Well, it's interesting. I was thinking the other day, in his book, Occult Science, Steiner writes, the spiritual seekers of our time can be called modern initiates of the Grail. I found that to be really interesting, and I, besides all the things we could say about Steiner, I really see him as this Grail king of our time, this modern bearer of the Holy Grail. And as you said, Richard, that all of the masters of the esoteric Christianity are working with him.
Right. Yeah, he's right in line with them, and that's a mouthful. That we are all modern seekers, after the Grail, but it's very true, very true.
And if we do align ourselves with this way of the Rose Cross, then we are taking up. He calls it a science of the Grail. So I thought that was really really touched me.
Yes.
So we've talked about what a ritual order is, what Rosicrucianism is, what an initiatic system is, and what Rudolf Steiner is. So, Richard, maybe you could talk just a little bit more about how this Rosicrucian initiatic system is based in the original rites of Mystica Eterna and how it wound up here or something like that.
Yeah, sure. So most familiar with Steiner would know that he had an order prior to anthroposophy called the Mizraim-Dienst. That means the Mizraim service. But the lodge, his temple was called the Mystica Eterna. And those rituals that he worked in that lodge have been preserved. I do not think that there is an unbroken succession, but they were not lost. They were preserved, and they were actually restarted in Sweden, probably close to 40, 50 years ago now, by a group of spiritual scientists over there who had gained charters from various other groups in order to be recognized in doing this. There are more rituals, obviously, than what's published just in GA 265, Freemasonry and Ritual Work. That one has the first 3 and then bits and pieces of 4 and 5, I think. But in the Mizraim service, all the rituals are still there. These are not, as far as I'm aware, in the possession of Dornoch. They were found in some of them in private archives and notes from different people who were part of the original Mizraim service, but were not part of anthroposophy after it was refounded. And a lot of those notes and rituals were kept in private libraries and private archives that were then later accessed by those who reawakened the rituals and then continued them. So we have what we do in the lodge coming from Steiner's original temple of the Mystica Eterna, the eternal mysteries. And it's not exactly as what is in the book. It's not that we have changed things, but what it is Steiner wrote several versions of the rituals. So you will see in our work some differences than what's published. But the reason for that is because the rituals that we accessed or that was passed down to us by those who researched the area and gained access to them and have been working with them for 40 or 50 years is because they had found several different versions of these rituals and tried to put them all back together as complete as possible, which I think they've done a fabulous job. So the first 3 degrees of the rituals, well, all of it has a Masonic system behind it. It outwardly looks like Freemasonry, and Steiner talks about this, but the content within the rituals is not Freemasonry. It's strictly spiritual science, the Rosicrucianism of Steiner. But the first 3 degrees are called the blue degrees, which correspond to how the Freemasons have the craft degrees or the Blue Lodge, the first 3 degrees. Then you have the red degrees, which are the 3 after that, and they correspond loosely to what Masons would think of as the Royal Arch. And then the final 3 degrees, because Steiner had condensed the system down to 9 degrees, the final 3 are referred to as the Arcana. And those get into more of a philosophical understanding of spiritual science and a lot of heavy symbolism. That's a lot to chew on there. But the foundational work of the Mizraim and the Mystica Americana and the Mizraim service, I would say globally, is the first 3. Now, the degrees. The other ones are in a way supplemental. The first 3 are the basis for everything that comes afterwards. And that's not to say that there isn't new or expanded information, but it all, and especially the third, it all in the 3rd degree, you can also correspond that to the Masonic 3rd degree. If you were curious of what happens there, you can see in Steiner's book, Freemasonry Ritual Work, and also regular Masons have a 3rd degree very similar to our own. And the symbolism of it is we share a lot of that symbolism as far as the characters and what takes place there. But then Steiner gave it a lot more depth with his Rosicrucian understanding. And also in regular Masonry, the first 3 degrees have been almost fractured. So what we would do in the 3rd degree, regular Masons would do in the 3rd and several degrees after that. It's all condensed into one with us. So it's much more elaborate. Things that you would go through and understand in one of our rituals would take several rituals to get to the same philosophical understanding, at least, in another system of that has like 33 degrees, 32 degrees, or even up higher degrees if you're going into the Mizraim, because those get up into the 90s. The Memphis Mizraim have degrees up into the 90s. But that's because it's been so spread out thin that you have to go through all of those to get the understanding that would come condensed into just one of ours.
You know, it's interesting to look at how these things started, and this continuum that Steiner's bringing. You know, he really wanted to have this connection to the powers behind these ancient mysteries, and then, you know, bring them into the future. So when you look at the early history of anthroposophy, you know, when Steiner first began working with Marie von Sievers, you know, she was actually very powerful in the lodge. He was the general secretary of the German section of the Theosophical Society. He was the arch warden of the esoteric section for them. And then they joined, and this is what he calls it, he says, in a purely formal way, the order of the ancient Masons of Mizraim, the Memphis Mizraim, right. But this was just, you know, to formally take up this continuum so that this tradition could move from the past into the future. And this initiative was really part of this this esoteric class, this section that he created.
Right.
It's a renewal of the Freemason and Rosicrucianism. And again, it isn't Freemasonry because Steiner took it and created out of his own karmic connection with the spiritual founders of this impulse, including Christian Rosenkreuz himself, right? So he's founding this completely independent group, and it's made up of people that are really longing to work with Western esotericism.
Right.
So the rites were renewed and rescued from the darkening twilight of materialism.
Sure. You know? Yeah. And there's several influences that can be traced in the rituals of the Mystica Aeterna, but I wouldn't say that they were copied, because I believe that two or more independent minds can reach the same spiritual truth without having to copy from each other. You know, Steiner speaks a little bit about that when he's talking about the rituals and him joining the Memphis Mizraim group, and why we share some of the same tools. You know, why do we have the trowel and the mallet and the different characters that share names with what we would understand to be Masonic names? He said, well, it's because it's truth. You know, am I not supposed to use it because they did? I am going to use it, but I'm going to give you so much more information about this. I'm going to renew this. I'm going to bring really a Christ light into it, you know, spiritual science and anthroposophy. So we do share a lot of things. You can find in the content of the rituals things that were said by other mystics and occultists and initiates from the past. But it's because what they said is true. And they're not quoted, but the same truth that they gave is also given fresh and renewed through Steiner, that you can still see the golden thread reaching back through those older initiates.
Right. So you can see that it's grounded in these ancient rites and legends.
Right.
But that the spiritual content that Steiner brought really provided a sacramental renewal.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that is now existing in multiple countries. So maybe you can talk a little bit about how Mysteria, Mystica, Americana is the North American representative of the International Mizraim Alliance. So maybe you could talk a little bit about what is the alliance, who else is out there working with Steiner's ritual orders.
Sure. Okay. So Sweden, Stockholm, Sweden, is the headquarters for the IMA, International Mizraim Alliance. What that alliance is that because Sweden kept these rituals alive and was working with them, over time, they granted charters to form other lodges. So when those lodges grew, organization kind of became an excuse me, a necessity. Uh, we would like to keep it as loose and as free as possible, but there has to be some uniformity among those who are practicing those rites. So the alliance was formed as a unifying, say, like an umbrella over the lodges that have come from Sweden. The Mystica Americana is one of them. Um, I was given the permission to go over there into Stockholm to be initiated into these Rudolf Steiner rituals and rites, and to bring them back to America and form a group over here under their charter, which makes us part of the alliance. We are a Grand Lodge, and see, this is a little bit of a distinction from how Masons understand Grand Lodge. In regular Freemasonry, each state has a Grand Lodge. Some states have two, and they're autonomous. They would, and all lodges in that state would fall under the Grand Lodge for that state. So we have the Grand Lodge of Texas, Freemasons here, but there are several smaller lodges all throughout Texas, and they all fall under the authority of the Grand Lodge of Texas. But when you go into other states, New York, California, Arkansas, even though you're recognized as being a brother of the group, it's quite separate from the Grand Lodge of Texas. Each state is independent. Each Grand Lodge is independent. Whereas in the Mizraim, what we have as Grand Lodges are the first lodges that go to a new country. So the first lodge that came to America would be this one, the Mystica Americana. So we are the Grand Lodge for North America. Any other lodges that are formed through us, by us. So if a member wants to move, be in another state and has enough people interested to form their own lodge, they would name their lodge whatever they wanted to, but they would get their charter from us, the Grand Lodge, which is here in Fort Worth, Texas. So we are a Grand Lodge not only in Texas, but in all other states as well, where that's quite different from the normal way that Freemasons work.
I wanted to go back to this, talking about the Mystica Eterna, because I just feel like there's a maybe a misconception amongst anthroposophists, because it's true that when the Great War broke out, that Steiner did dissolve that group, but then after the war, he renewed the Mizraim Dienst. And I think that's important to point out, because this service of the new mysteries, which had been done since, it had to change because the world changed. And that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to be specific for what is needed in the world right now. And this service is ever evolving, and justice, humanity, and the universe are changing. And there are other people in other parts of Europe also working the Mizraim Dienst. And I think it's important to point that out as well.
Yeah, all over Europe. There's Mizraim temples, Mizraim Dienst temples that work the Steiner rituals in Sweden, Italy. I believe there might be one in Norway. I know we have a brother in England, Denmark. There's one in Germany. Now, all of these do not fall under the IMA. They're not part of the International Mizraim Alliance. All of those lodges did not come from Sweden, but they are still, we work in amity with them. We still consider them our brothers and sisters. We share in this work. The Grand Lodge organization and what we would call, for lack of a better word, jurisdictions, all of that's just formal wording that we use just to keep the organizational structure coherent. But there's Steiner ritual practitioners all over Europe. There's actually some that are in the process that may be beginning in a few of the other countries. So before long, they're going to be quite numerous temples, and I wouldn't speak to how that translate into the numbers of members, but right now it's very active in Europe.
And I think it's important to distinguish this idea of what is this Mizraim dienst, this Mizraim service. And you mentioned that it is this mystery name of ancient Egypt. And so we do have this connection with these Egyptian temple rites. And
Yes.
we know that spiritual science really talks about the evolution of human consciousness as seen through the various cultural epochs, right? So
Yeah.
part of the work of our time now is to recapitulate, to reiterate on a higher level, a more conscious level, the mysteries of the ancient Egypto-Chaldean epoch. To
Yeah.
take up the essence of these rituals from that potent time, which is especially available to us now. I think that's an important thing to think about, especially because Steiner really gives this picture of how these rites that were practiced so powerfully in Egyptian times actually originated from the solar mysteries of ancient Atlantis. So yeah, I mean, it might not be an unbroken line, but there is this practice that has existed
Right.
since these very early spiritual times.
Right. And the line that was broken is just the outer line. Inwardly, spiritually, that line has never been broken.
Yeah. And so, what would you say, Richard, and everyone really? What is your vision for Mysteria, Mystica, Americana in today's America? I mean, look where we are.
Well, you know, I want to do the best that we can with what we have. And I think that to make it available would be the main goal, not to make it seem in any way, in an egotistical way, that this is what one should be doing or that this is better like this. I just want to let it be known that if you are interested and if you are serious practitioners of spiritual science and Rudolf Steiner, and you're interested in this type of work, that we're here, that we're serious, and that we have those rituals. And so far, those who have engaged with it that I know are some of the best people I've ever met. I know it's helped me understand spiritual science in a way that I didn't before. Um, and it has led to some of the best friendships, meaningful connections between others who work these rituals. And it's just been so fulfilling, personally, that I would like to make that, I would like to present that to the world as authentically as I can, just so it becomes available. Because prior to the MA, the Mystica Americana, it was not available, not here. We could be serious. We could be as dedicated as we wanted to be, but we would not have had a chance to do the ritual work unless we were able to travel back and forth to Europe. Now that's no longer necessary because we're here. So my vision would be just to present it as honestly and as authentically as possible, and just to do it freely as an option to those who are searching for it.
Maybe I can talk a little bit about what it looks like from my perspective, being a member. What happens? We've been meeting in person, people from around the country, a small handful of people, really. Generally twice or three times a year in person to gather for spiritual fellowship and activities. So we've gone on retreats, we've held retreats that include moving people through the initiatic steps, and also gatherings to just enrich and deepen our relationships with each other. Each level, each the apprentices and the prospectives and the fellowcraft, etc., each have a once a month gathering option online to deepen conversation about the specifics of working that particular level of initiation. And there's an interest in sort of mentoring as one moves along the process of mentoring the people who are coming along behind you. And so that's a little bit of sort of what the daily process is. Some of us have been able to travel to Europe individually or as groups, and we're aiming to go. Many of us, a number of us, are going in April to Italy for an international gathering, and so there's a fellowship and a camaraderie that develops centered around the work. And then I wanted to talk just for myself what I experience in my work with MA that I wasn't experiencing in some 40 years of anthroposophy and studies and things like that. And that was, for me, I guess I have a systematic self, and there's just so many possible directions that one can go in with the breadth of research, reading, 6,000 lectures, etc. And I would tend to do quite a bit of reading, join study groups and things like that. But for my own sort of step-by-step processes, I kind of would lose my my basis or my compass, I could say. And by going through this initiatic system, I am given specific tasks to work on. And I really like that. What struck me very strongly when I first entered the process with Richard was his statement about the initiation as membership versus the actual spiritual activity of initiation. And I really experienced that, I think, very strongly. I've gone through my third step here. And while the ritual itself was amazing and incredible, it really was what's followed that, where I feel like the ritual itself opened the door for the beginning of a deeper, more intense spiritual journey approaching initiation on that level. And I believe for me personally, I've been able to accomplish things in my professional life, in my personal life, that have been of greater power and greater reach in the world, bringing a higher level of love and light out into the world with a greater sense of courage since I began this work. And for me, that is what keeps me interested in it, because nothing else that I did gave me the self-discipline that it takes to remain actively moving on the path.
Yeah. It's really interesting that you said compass, because with the vastness of spiritual science, the enormity of the material and wealth of information that Steiner gave, you can think of it almost like if anthroposophy was the starry heavens, the Mizraim service is like the North Star, by where you can guide yourself through the vastness of those starry heavens. And that's how it works in my life as well. It keeps me on a track. It keeps me grounded and in the direction I'm supposed to go, because without the North Star, it's very difficult. If you think of the ancients navigating the sea, navigating even land, it is that consistent, solid point of light amidst a billion other points of lights that he gave us. But the one that I use to navigate through all of that is the Mizraim service, like the North Star.
I really relate to that. And I've come to understand and deeply believe that sincere seekers can be spiritually cultured. We can grow and change. And when I do the work and I'm consistent with it, I am changed. But it takes work. We have to do it every day. But it provides you with holy tools, fostered through dedicated patience and practice. And then we really do become equipped with the knowledge and the wisdom concerning the evolution of the world. We're getting to know ourselves, and then we're seeing, how that can be in the world. So that we can really build the appropriate perception and reception for, the prestigious spiritual truths that stand behind the world events. So that we're not getting buffeted by, the outrage or the shutdown, right? And then we can see that we can not only shape who we are as to become true human beings, but we can actually, by doing this for ourselves, we can actually shape events in the world. We can bring harmony to the world because we are in harmony and we're doing the work and we're working from these inner planes. So yeah, I really see that the earnest students can really pour these embodied truths out into this ever unfolding progression.
Right.
We can make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not exclusive. There's no exclusivity to what we do. It's free for anyone that wants to do this work. Of course, there are things in the temple that we do not discuss outwardly, but that is not because they're secret. It's because we think they're sacred. We hold them dear to our hearts, and we don't want to just toss these things out to be in any way abused or otherwise by people who don't take it as seriously. Anyone who goes through those steps is free to come and join in this work and then leave it if it's not for them. But there's no exclusivity, there's no elitism, there is nothing in the Mizraim service that says we are any way different or better or more knowledgeable or any adjective you want to stick to that. None of that applies to what we're doing. All we're doing is applying the rituals to the knowledge that we have. We're trying to enact them. And the reason we don't do it out in the middle of the street, in the middle of the sun with everybody watching, is for the same reason the Bible says, don't cast pearls before swine. Like the Fama Fraternitatis says, you don't put your roses before the ass. It's because we hold these things dear and near to us in our hearts, and they matter and they're meaningful to us. And they are enacted in a room that is set aside for that purpose. And everything that takes place in that room, which we call a lodge, is very solemn and very serious.
And what's coming to light more and more for me is that, as the world seems to be sinking into the abyss, there are potent occult processes working in the spiritual worlds that will to be brought forth through us, through individual human beings. We could call ourselves friends of God, and we come together in sovereignty, in our own free will, in America and beyond. It's about this inspiring into the head, the hand, the heart, and what the spiritual world would have us carry out, in order to bring forth the best in the destiny of humankind.
Right, absolutely.
I'm wondering if we might want to open up the conversation a little bit and see if anyone has any thoughts to share or questions, maybe.
Sure. Feel free to jump in.
And in lieu of, if you're not ready to ask any questions yet, Hazel, maybe you would like to share with us for a few moments why we chose today to create this event.
Yeah. Well, I just really love the cycle of the year. I think it's great. And I love that MA gives me an opportunity to bring my passion, and so, we have to take advantage of these milestone events, right? And I just thought, it would be an amazing opportunity to gather at this cross quarter time between the winter solstice and the vernal equinox, because it's a liminal time. It's a time where we can really rededicate ourselves. We can discover, like, what is our true purpose. We can plant the seeds for what we want to see grow that way. And when we stand at that threshold where our true purpose and the world's deep hunger meet, then we can really take this opportunity, this time for purification, really a time to consecrate ourselves and realign our lives, because the sap is starting to rise. The groundhogs and the bears are coming out of hibernation. And, personally, I love, Steiner talks a lot about the Celtic and the Druid mysteries. And so this cross quarter is aligned with Bridget's Day, and bringing these qualities of these Druid mysteries, this understanding of seeing into the etheric realm. We can develop these new spiritual organs, this understanding of what the rituals among the standing stones were like. And then to bring in this powerful triple goddess, which is associated with the mysteries of the sacred well, right? These are the waters of purification, and the creative fires of the forge, right? To call in the will of the sun. So we can tap into these archetypes, and enact our own alchemical marriage between fire and water to give us, a birth of creative transformation. So it's just another opportunity.
Yes.
I love this image Bridget has, and maybe you can flesh this out a little bit for me, Hazel. I'm not sure. Where she unfolds her cloak, and her cloak, there's a lovely song that a Waldorf teacher wrote about the, the king restricting the land, and Bridget going to the king and begging him to not put these restrictions on, and he resists, and she gets him to compromise that if she can, would he give her, release the land to the people that her cloak could cover, and he looks at this young woman and sees this little cloak, and he agrees, and then she gives the four corners of her cloak to four maidens who then carry it across the wells and the streams and the fields, and it expands and expands and expands, bringing the spring and stuff like that. And I think I see in this image of this unfolding growth of green, this birth of spring, as an image for this spiritual work that may be feel like it's under snow right now. It may feel like it's iced over and blocked out, but it is growing, and it can continue to unfold and bring new life into the earth. And I think Mystica Americana can help us do that.
It's wonderful to see how this powerful goddess can become a saint, and she can have these qualities of a human being. And we can live with both of those archetypes, because we're bigger, aren't we? We are divine beings, and we can do this work. There's also another legend that she was the midwife at the birth of Christ, right? So there's many stories of her as a healer and many things. But I think Jeffrey has a hand up.
Yeah, Jeffrey.
I do. And I think you covered this, but I didn't quite grasp it. Why do you suppose that Steiner has involved in this other path that he did not include in the society and the first class?
Well, I'll venture forth that he passed is a lot of the answer. The fact that just as he was bringing forth this school of spiritual science, this work was, I believe, intended to become part of the second and third classes. You could even say that that the higher degrees would have been the third class, and the lower degrees potentially. Now, I'm just speaking out of my own spiritual scientific research, shall we say, that it one can see, if one looks around his deathbed and what people are wearing, you recognize, you will see paraphernalia and wardrobe present in his final days. And I think that the work, because it wasn't brought forth fully, and because there were rifts in the society during that time, that I believe that if Steiner had continued to live, these would have been brought into the later classes. They would have been part of the School of Spiritual Science.
Yeah, he specifically says that the third class was going to be completely ritualistic. So,
I mean, if you look at, he does give a lot of indications of how the first class was the Michael school. That, he gives that beautiful picture of how we were all in the spiritual world, in this Michael school, and that after that there was the cultus. He calls it the cultus, which is where the cognitive ritual part comes in, and that what was given in the school is then put into practice in the cultus, and so that was to come later in the second and third classes.
right.
Does that help answer that question, Jeffrey?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. It's a good question. Other thoughts, questions, ideas? Michael, would you like to contribute anything? Okay.
Well, thank everyone for taking the time out to stop by and have this conversation with us. I think it's meaningful. The more that, we have another one.
Great. Amy.
Can I talk?
Yeah.
Hello?
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah.
I think Amy's going to go first.
Go ahead.
My question was the perspectives. How is that different than biography work, or is that part of biography work?
The prospectus?
Yes.
Well, in a large sense, it would be biography work, because you're working on yourself and attempting to understand yourself. But also what you're doing during the prospectus is you keep a journal every day. You're revisiting, if you don't already or haven't already, you revisit the 6 basic exercises. And during this 9-month period that the prospectus lasts, the 6 exercises are brought in stages. So you have the first one, then you do the second one. After a certain amount of time, you add the third one. And by the end of the 9 months, you're doing all 6 of them while keeping a journal and reading the basic books that we spoke about. So it's a fertile time for us to really start to get serious, if we're not already, and engage in the work, to start to develop the discipline that Steiner tells us we need with the 6 basic exercises, the discipline of journaling, which has an immense value reflective when you look back on your journal, when you look back on your thought process and how it's evolved through the stages until you're initiated into the first degree. And hopefully your journaling doesn't stop, your 6 basic exercises don't stop, they will continue throughout, or should continue throughout, your career in the occult, you know? So in a sense, it's biography work, but it's also much more specific to just building that discipline and awareness moving forward into the ritual work that you're about to do.
So it's kind of like a foundation class.
Yes, it is. It is really a foundation.
Okay. Okay. And during that time frame, you mentioned a mentor.
Yeah, yeah. If you seek to join the MA, you would send an email to the website, and that email will be responded to with the prospectus document that tells you all about it, what you're expected to do, and what we need from you. Like, we obviously need your name, you know, where you live, if we're going to be mailing you some documents that we do not transmit digitally, and also where you're at is as far as your availability to come to Fort Worth for the actual ceremony, because the ritual degrees have to be done in person. They can't be done by yourself at home or transmitted, you know, online. So at some point, the candidate must come to the lodge for that ceremony to happen. Generally, there'd be about a 1 year period between each stage of that. So you would come after the prospectus to get the first one, and then you're eligible for the next one 1 year from that date. That doesn't mean that you automatically get it or that you even have to apply for it at that time. It's just that that is when you become eligible for the next one, and we can begin to make plans for gathering and you know, how it would all come together. We would work out the details that way.
Okay. Thank you.
James.
James, yeah.
Yeah, so I just want to know how we can get a ritual group started in Portland, Oregon.
Portland, Oregon. What you can do is
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
How many people do you need for a ritual group?
For a lodge?
Yeah, a lodge. Yeah.
Ideally, you would need at least 6, but it can be done with 5. We, in the beginning, had 3 here in Fort Worth, but we were able to, we had the great privilege that some from Europe came and were officers for us here. And we were able to also have substitute officers come and help us fulfill those positions that are needed. The reason you need that many is because there are officers that speak dialogue. And if you don't have the required number of people, you're going to be trying to run from one position to another inside, trying to fill these positions while other people are having to move as well. So it's better to have at least 5 just so things can be done properly. However, that does not stop you from getting the rituals here. So one could travel to Fort Worth and be initiated and go home, and in another year come back and, you know, get the next initiation. And you are able to apply for a charter to start your own group after you have the 3rd degree. So once you reach the 3rd degree, you become eligible for a lodge if you have a membership that would make it possible.
So I suspect we have close to a dozen people ready now.
Well, then let's get the ball rolling.
So I've sent an email and hadn't heard anything back. So I was just
You sent what? An email?
email to your website asking what I have to do and hadn't heard anything back. So I was just curious.
How long has it been?
Oh, 3 or 4 days.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll answer you. I'm sorry. I probably have 50 or more emails in the last 3 or 4 days, but I will get to it.
What probably would be helpful is we could put an announcement in our newsletter. We have a newsletter. We have a lot of members here. Could we have a meeting like this again where I can invite?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And when you say members, you mean anthroposophists?
Anthroposophists, Rosicrucians, and Masons.
Yeah, fantastic. We can definitely do a meeting. It can either be an open public meeting or we can have one in private, whichever you'd prefer. We can discuss these things. We would all have to begin with the prospectus.
Yeah.
You know, there's no shortcuts. We don't do, multiple degrees at a time for one individual. Everything follows the structure. So I can send you the prospectus along when I answer the email if you want it. Anyone else that's here, if you're curious about it, send an email to americanmisraim@gmail.com, and I will respond with the prospectus document for you to view. That's an open document. You can do with it as you will. And after you read that, there's instructions in there if you want to continue of what to do next.
Okay.
Fantastic, James. Thank you. Anyone else?
Anyone else? Other thoughts, questions, ideas? Well, we are so grateful for you joining us tonight.
Yes, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Night.
Good night.